Welcome to Business Success Tips, where you learn to make more money in less time and hopefully have a lot more fun. I'm your host, Paul Sanneman. I'm founder of Contractor Staffing Source. We help contractors build great teams. I have Joe from Cycle CPA. So, Joe, what does Cycle CPA do?
So, thanks first off, Paul, for having me on here. And it's great what you do for contractors in regard to helping them with recruiting. As for Cycle CPA, we do anything from bookkeeping to virtual CFO and tax services as well. So, we specifically serve green industry companies.
Now, question. I was a coach for a long time, and the problem I had was a lot of contractors have a CPA. They're their only contractor client, right? And the CPA they talk about, cost of goods sold, and they understand the argument instead of, work in progress. So how do we help convince people that your CPA should specialize in your trade?
That's a good question, Paul. And I think there's a couple of positives to it. I think one, even internally as an accounting firm that works more specifically with one industry, our systems allow us to, I would say, even price our work better than most companies, because everything is already designed to work in those specific cases. We're not having to relearn business models every other client
I hate to say it, but a lot of times contractors are paying for the learning curve of their CPA in construction.
Exactly. Yeah. And our goal is to honestly do the opposite, where it's, yes, handling a lot of those typical accounting tax functions that any accounting firm should be able to handle, doing it more efficiently, but more importantly, being able to advise companies based on what we're seeing across our client base and applying things that we're seeing that is working great with other clients, but then also seeing things that clients are doing that isn't working well, and helping our clients so that they don't make those same mistakes that we see. So I would say that's really the biggest aspect, Paul, is the advisory component, is taking those financials and the accounting aspects and, ultimately helping the business owners, whatever their goal is, whether it's just looking to optimize profits and cash flow, or whether they're looking to grow the business, giving them the financial perspective into that. Just as a large company might have a full-time CFO, just because a company is not 15, 20 million in sales doesn't mean that they should still get that managerial accounting perspective and, someone in their corner to help manage cash flow and, look at, should we increase our pricing on our customer base? Should we purchase this piece of equipment? So I would say those are probably some of the biggest items there.
I know, P&L's changed, gross margin, net profit, all changed with different kind of businesses. And to me, your CPA and your accounting firm should say, well, your gross margin's high, it's low, your net profit's high or low, your margin, be able to analyze a financial statement, not just say, okay, how do I pay as little taxes as I can? Because unfortunately, a lot of people go to their CPA and say, just reduce my taxes and I'm good. They don't deal with the business. They don't deal with, should I invest? What should I do? It isn't CFO advice. It's just tax advice.
Yeah. And that's a key point, Paul. And that's a great point, because I think a lot of contractors are either skewed too much in one direction, right? Maybe they get, at the end of the year, they get some good tax advice, or their CPA helps them with their taxes, right? More from a compliance perspective, making sure the government's happy. But how are certain decisions being made throughout the year based on some of the financials, right? That's the part that could be locking. And that's really the difference between more of tax accounting and the compliance perspective, how to decrease tax liability as much as legally possible, versus what a CFO should really do, right? Where it's managing risk, looking at, okay, how can we increase gross margins? So it's really balancing those two aspects. And Paul, it is common where, a good amount of our clients especially as they're looking to kind of scale, or all of a sudden they've had a year with some pretty quick growth, where they've realized that they kind of outgrew their local CPA in certain ways. And not to say that some CPAs are not great at what they do, but some are just more geared towards things like the tax compliance, right? Which doesn't necessarily support the goals of...
Normally, unfortunately, most people see their CPA in January for, whatever, 4 or 5 hours, maybe 2 hours.
Yeah.
And then they see him again in January or, before April to figure out the tax, and they're done. I mean, that's it. That's the whole connection with their whole accounting firm is, here's my stuff, fix it, what taxes do I owe, and help me file my taxes. And that's it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's like another example to kind of get a little more granular into things, something like a budget, right? Where especially a lot of contractors operate a seasonal business. So you might sit in July or August and you might have a certain sales goal of, let's say, 2 million for that year. And because you are looking at a budget multi-month, studying, okay, what actually happened with the data versus what we budget for, and you notice, oh, wow, we're actually under our budgeted revenue target for the year by 150,000. Now, if you weren't aware of that, and if things just went on as it was, that could be a good amount of your profit margin that's wiped away. But because you're budgeting or because you're more on top of your financials, you can make certain decisions in July or August to help prevent you from not hitting that profit.
I mean, it's like they take labor costs, or labor's a variable, right? And a lot of people keep people on too long because I'll just keep them busy, which is burning up profit like crazy, right? I'm sure you've seen that. Because you can control your labor budget, right? And you're right, you need to have a budget depending on revenue, and that budget needs to vary with revenue. You can't say, well, we're going to keep these people all year long, but they're going to sit around 3 months of the year.
Yeah.
Not a good idea.
Yeah. And I think when you look at things like direct labor, or sometimes referred to as field labor, is often within the direct costs or cost of goods, that could be more directly tied to a lot of the work that's being done on the projects, right? Or in the field. Whereas overhead labor or administrative labor, that's something I think companies should be extra careful of whenever they're making those kind of hires, because you can easily, like for many landscape companies, or even just in general, many contractors, typically overhead labor will be around 10% of total revenue. So if you're, let's say, again, bringing up a $2 million company, if you have 400,000 that's overhead labor, that's double the amount that there should be. So then you can, really have more of an understanding of, okay, if we don't hit that revenue goal, that's going to have a huge impact on the margins.
On the profit, right.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I just talked to a person this morning, and they came to us and they said, well, I just started on with this new company with the CPA, and my job is to get offshore labor as much as possible. A lot of them consider that. I mean, if you were a financial advisor, you'll look at, we can do the estimating offshore for a fraction of the cost. We can do the marketing offshore for a fraction of the cost. And I think the finance needs to give that kind of advice. Like, why pay somebody $40 an hour here? You find the same person in the Philippines for $8 an hour and they can kill it. I mean, that's the kind of advice that contractors are not getting from their CPAs.
Yeah. And there's a certain creativity to that as well, because as a company scales, oftentimes it's, you even want to put yourself in a position where if you're adding overhead, that you're always thinking twice about that, because there's a reason at the end of the day and why some companies operate at a 40% overhead as a percent of revenue, and then other companies can operate at a 20%. Right? And I think
both landscaping companies, and they're both in New Jersey. Just kidding, right?
Yeah. So it's I think it's so worth it to look into things like offshoring with certain aspects, or leveraging certain experts like what your company does, Paul, and
or even buying groups. Like, I mean,
yeah,
there's lots of ways if you think in advance. A construction company, whether it's offshore labor and buying groups or the way you run your business, that CPAs just don't. That's not their job. They look, give me your pay, I'll do your taxes, I'll save you some money on taxes, and we're done.
yeah, yeah, and it's even it even becomes a competitive advantage, because then some contractors might not see it as that big of a deal, but at the end of the day, if you're creative with some of this stuff, and you're able to lower some of your overhead costs, you can price your jobs at a lower rate than your competition while making the same profit margin.
Right.
And
absolutely.
so it's, I think it's, especially overhead costs. And Paul, I think the thing that came to mind first was the overhead salaries and administrative staff, just because it is a little bit more complex, because, like I said before, when you're looking at just one single project or one single contract, I think it's easier to determine the direct or field labor that is required for that specific job. But when you look at the overhead and more the supportive roles behind it, whether it's management and other aspects.
Marketing person, yeah. Do I need another admin assistant? I mean, I've helped people say, well, you need somebody in the office, but why don't we get somebody offshore to answer the emails? I mean, it makes no sense, right? Yeah. So I think your company is the kind of company that can give that kind of advice on an ongoing basis. I'm sure more than pays for itself. And most small companies don't have CFOs. It's just too expensive. And some of these fractional CFOs are like crazy expensive, like $250 an hour, right?
Yeah.
I'm going, dude. So I think you have that mixture where you're giving CFO advice, but you're not charging $250 an hour, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I would say we're, as a firm, I mean, we're definitely competitively priced, and our goal is for our clients to get an ROI. How can we increase profitability by 5%? What is that equivalent to? And trying to find angles to improve, because at the end of the day, that's where most of the opportunity is. You can save a little bit of money here and there with certain accounting fees, stuff like that, but it's really more about, I think, trying to eliminate other bottlenecks in the company. I think that's really
a company that's run better will be more profitable for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
A lot of contractors that I've worked with they have maybe some advice on project management because they're working with like JobTrack, some software. They've got QuickBooks doing their accounting. They're just tracking stuff, and they'll have like a CPA they see once a year, but they don't have that person who's doing strategic financial advice, which makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
I'm assuming that's what you guys do, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's more of a streamlined model where, like you said, I mean, instead of having to hire someone full time, or even getting to the point where we can fill specific voids that companies might have. Maybe it's more the advisory component, or maybe it is more of the transactional and categorizing some of the transactions or the month end close. So there are different levels to what we can do, Paul, and but I think at the end of the day, I just don't want accounting and the financial side to be why companies aren't able to kind of get to that next level, because there are so many solutions out there and resources, similar to recruiting. I mean, how many companies is recruiting their biggest bottleneck, but they're not putting any resources towards it.
Right. It's interesting. Very few construction companies have a recruiting budget. And I'm going, it's your biggest problem. They go, well, I put in an ad Indeed and I have a 50% turnover. I go, well, that's your fault, right? So I think it's the same kind of thing. So question is, if people want to get in touch with you, I would say if you don't have a budget, you don't know your numbers every month, you don't have a clear path for the year, and you're in any kind of green business, you should call Joe. So,
No,
Joe, how do they get in touch with you?
So they can go to Cycle CPA, and they can, anywhere they schedule a call goes right to me. So that's probably the best way.
Okay. Well, I would call, if you're in that business and you don't know those numbers and every month is like, oh my God, what's going to happen? You can get rid of a lot of that frustration by calling Joe. Thanks, Joe. I appreciate you having me here.
Thanks, Paul.